The massive space station Vashatar floated in the dark space between three bright stars. It was bigger than most moons and had thousands of lights blinking on its surface. Ships from every corner of the galaxy came here to trade goods and make deals. Today was special. Today was the biggest trade meeting in 50 years. Inside the station, beings from dozens of different worlds walked through the wide metal corridors. Some had 4 arms, others had blue skin, and many looked nothing like humans at all. They all spoke in different languages, creating a noise that echoed off the curved walls. But today, everyone was talking about the same thing. The Keth Mori Empire had brought their secret weapon to show off. They called her Silthara, and she was the most feared creature in known space. Captain Namho stood quietly in the main viewing hall with his small group of humans. He was a tall man with kind eyes and graying hair. His uniform was simple and clean, not fancy like the other diplomats. Next to him, his 7-year-old daughter, Sora, pressed her nose against the thick glass window, trying to get a better look at all the strange aliens walking by. "Daddy, why does everyone look scared?" Sora asked in Korean. Her voice was soft and curious, the way children sound when they discover something new. Namho looked down at his daughter and smiled. "They are not used to seeing so many different people in one place, little star." Dr. Hai Wan, a woman with short black hair and thick glasses, was writing notes on her electronic pad. She studied aliens for a living and had never seen so many species together. "Captain, the bio readings I am getting are very interesting. Every species here shows high stress levels except us." Engineer Boram nodded as she looked at her scanner. "The station's security is incredible. I count over 300 weapon systems just in this section alone." From across the large room, a deep horn sounded. The noise was so loud it made the metal walls shake. All the talking stopped at once. Every alien in the hall turned toward the far end where a huge door was slowly opening. Commander Veltar of the Keth Mori Empire walked through the door first. He was 8 feet tall with gray skin that looked like stone. His red eyes glowed in the dim light, and he wore black armor covered in sharp spikes. Behind him walked 6 other Keth Mori warriors, each one carrying a weapon that hummed with energy. But it was not the warriors that made everyone step back in fear. Behind them, through a doorway that was 30 feet high, came Silthara. She was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Her body was longer than 3 spaceships put together. Her scales were pure white, like fresh snow, and they seemed to glow with their own light. Her neck was as thick as a tree trunk, and her head was the size of a small house. Most frightening of all were her eyes. They were deep red, like pools of blood, and they seemed to look right through anyone who dared to meet her gaze. Silthara moved slowly into the viewing area. Heavy chains made of some unknown metal were wrapped around her legs and neck. The chains glowed with purple energy and made a soft buzzing sound. Even with the chains, she moved like flowing water, smooth and graceful. Sora gasped and grabbed her father's hand. "Daddy, she is so big." Namho squeezed his daughter's hand gently. "Yes, she is very big, little star. But remember what I taught you about judging others." Many of the aliens in the room began backing away. Some were shaking with fear. Others were whispering prayers in their native languages. A few had even fainted and were being carried away by their friends. Commander Veltar's voice boomed across the room. "Behold Silthara, the White Death, destroyer of the Crimson Fleet, the beast, who turned the moon of Kalar into dust. She has lived for over 200 years and has never been defeated in battle." Dr. Heywan was taking readings with her scanner. The numbers on her screen made her eyes go wide. "Captain, her bioenergy output is off the charts. I have never seen anything like this?" Security Officer Thalchris, who had 4 arms and purple skin, was speaking quickly into his communication device. All units, maintain safe distance. No one gets within 50 meters of the creature without my permission. But Sora was not listening to the warnings or feeling the fear that filled the room. She was studying Silthara's face with the honest curiosity that only children have. While everyone else saw a monster, Sora saw something different. The great dragon's red eyes were looking around the room, but not with anger or hunger. They looked sad and tired. Silthara's massive head hung low, and her breathing was slow and heavy. The chains around her neck seemed to weigh her down, making her shoulders sag. "Daddy," Sora whispered, "why does she look so lonely?" Before Namho could answer, Ambassador Wei Jin approached their group. She was Namho's sister and the leader of their diplomatic mission. Her face was serious as she watched the crowd's reaction to Silthara. "Brother, we need to be very careful here. The other species are watching how we react. If we show fear, they will think humans are weak. If we show no fear at all, they will think we are foolish." Namho nodded, but kept his eyes on his daughter, who was still staring at the great dragon. "Wei Jin, what do you know about how they treat her?" "Not much. The Kethmori keep their methods secret. But I have heard rumors that she has not been outside her containment cell in over 50 years. As if she had heard them talking, Silthara's great head turned in their direction. Her red eyes found Sora standing at the window. For a moment, that seemed to last forever. The small human girl and the ancient dragon looked at each other. Sora raised her small hand and pressed it against the glass. She did not smile or wave. She just looked into those sad red eyes with understanding. That was far beyond her 7 years. Something passed between them in that moment. Something that made Commander Veltar frown and Dr. Haywan's scanner start beeping rapidly. For the first time in decades, Silthara's eyes showed something other than emptiness or rage. They showed recognition. They showed hope. The White Death, destroyer of fleets and ender of worlds, had seen something in a little human girl that no one else had bothered to look for. Kindness. 3 hours had passed since the great dragon was displayed to the galactic diplomats. The trade meetings had begun in earnest, with representatives from different worlds arguing over shipping routes and resource rights. The air in the conference rooms was thick with tension and the smell of alien sweat. Captain Namho sat at a long metal table facing the Zephyrian Council. The Zephyrians looked like tall blue birds with silver feathers and large black eyes. They spoke in high-pitched voices that sounded like singing, but their words were sharp and demanding. "The humans want too much for their medical supplies," chirped Council Leader Zephyria. Her feathers ruffled with annoyance. "Your people have only been in space for 200 years. You should be grateful we even speak with you." Namho kept his voice calm and steady. "Our medicines have saved lives on 17 different worlds. The price reflects their value and the research that created them." While her father worked, Sora sat in a small chair beside him, coloring pictures on her electronic pad. She had drawn the space station, some of the friendly aliens she had met, and several pictures of Silthara. In every picture, she had made the dragon's eyes look kind instead of scary. The meeting dragged on for another hour. Sora grew tired of sitting still and began to fidget. She looked around the room at all the serious adult faces. Everyone was frowning and talking in loud voices about numbers and contracts. "Daddy," she whispered in Korean, "can I go get a drink of water?" Namho was deep in conversation with Dr. Moonsick about trade regulations, but he nodded and pointed toward the door. "Stay close to the conference level, little star. Do not wander far." Sora slipped out of the meeting room into the quieter hallway. The corridor was wide and curved, with soft blue lights along the walls. She could hear the humming of the station's engines deep below her feet. The sound reminded her of her mother singing lullabies back on Earth. She found a water dispenser and got her drink, but instead of going back to the boring meeting, she decided to explore a little. The hallway branched off in several directions, and each path had signs in different alien languages. Sora could not read most of them, but she could see pictures that showed where each path led. One sign showed what looked like living quarters, another showed dining areas. But the sign that caught her attention had a picture of something that looked like Silthara. Below the picture were symbols that glowed red, which she guessed meant danger. Sora looked back toward the meeting room, then at the path that led toward the dragon. She knew her father had told her to stay close, but she also remembered what he had taught her about being brave and kind to others who seemed lonely. The corridor that led toward Silthara was different from the others. It was dimmer and quieter. The walls were thicker, and Sora could see heavy blast doors every 50 meters. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked, making her feel very small in the big space. After walking for 10 minutes, she came to a large viewing window. Through the thick glass, she could see into an enormous chamber. The room was so big that it had its own weather system, with light clouds near the ceiling and a gentle breeze moving through artificial trees. And there, in the center of the vast space, was Silthara. The great dragon was alone. The chains were still wrapped around her neck and legs, but they were longer now, allowing her to move around the chamber. She was lying on what looked like a nest made of metal beams and synthetic cushions. Her white scales caught the artificial sunlight and made rainbow patterns on the walls. But what struck Sora most was how sad Silthara looked. Her massive head rested on her front legs, and her red eyes stared at nothing. She looked like the old dog that lived near Sora's school back on Earth, the one that had lost its family and spent its days waiting for someone who would never come home. Sora pressed her face against the viewing window. The glass was warm and hummed slightly with energy. She could feel vibrations through the floor, probably from Silthara's massive heartbeat. "Why are you alone?" she said softly in Korean, her breath making a small cloud on the glass. As if she had heard the quiet voice, Silthara's great head lifted. Her red eyes searched the viewing area until they found the small human girl pressed against the window. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Sora raised her hand and placed it flat against the glass. "I am Sora," she said in the simple, galactic standard she had been learning. "What is your name?" Silthara slowly rose to her feet. Even lying down, she had been huge, but standing up, she was like a living mountain. She moved with careful grace toward the viewing window, her chains dragging behind her with soft metallic sounds. When she reached the glass, Silthara lowered her massive head until her nose was just inches away from where Sora's hand rested. The dragon's breath fogged the window, and Sora could see her own reflection in those ancient red eyes. "You look scary, but you look sad," Sora said, switching back to Korean without thinking about it. Something amazing happened then. Silthara made a sound that was not a roar or a growl. It was soft and musical, almost like she was trying to speak. Her eyes, which had been dull and lifeless during the morning's display, began to show something that looked like curiosity. Sora smiled. "You are beautiful," she whispered. Security Officer Thalchris was making his regular patrol rounds when he heard voices in the restricted section. He quickened his pace, thinking that some fool diplomat had gotten lost and wandered into a dangerous area. But when he rounded the corner and saw what was happening, he froze. A human child was standing at the main viewing window of Silthara's containment chamber. And the dragon, the creature that had destroyed entire star fleets, was pressed against the glass from the inside, making soft cooing sounds. Thalchris reached for his communication device with one of his 4 hands, but stopped when he saw the readings on his security scanner. Silthara's bioenergy levels were dropping. Her stress indicators were lower than they had been in over 50 years. Most incredibly, her aggression markers were almost at 0. The little human girl was talking to the most dangerous creature in the galaxy, and somehow the dragon was listening. The security alarms began wailing throughout Vashatar Station with a sound like screaming metal. Red lights flashed in every corridor as automated voices announced in 12 different languages that there was an emergency in the high security section. Within minutes, the station's emergency response teams were racing through the hallways. Captain Namho burst out of the trade meeting when he heard his daughter was missing. His heart pounded as he ran through the corridors, following the security officers who were heading toward the restricted zone. Ambassador Wei Jin was right behind him, along with Dr. Heywan and Engineer Bo Ram. "How did she get past the security checkpoints?" Wei Jin shouted over the noise of the alarms. Security officer Thalcris was running alongside them, his forearms moving as he tried to explain. "The child is small, and the sensors are set to detect adult-sized beings. She walked right past them without triggering any warnings." They reached the viewing area to find Sora still standing at the window, completely calm despite all the chaos around her. She was talking quietly to Silthara in a mixture of Korean and broken galactic standard. The great dragon had not moved away from the glass and seemed to be listening to every word. "Sora!" Namho called out, trying to keep his voice gentle despite his fear. "Come away from the window, little star." Sora turned around with a bright smile. "Daddy, look! She is not mean at all. She is just lonely. Her name is Silthara, and she has been by herself for a very long time." Commander Veltar arrived with a squad of heavily armed Kethmori warriors. Their weapons were charged and ready, and their red eyes glowed with anger and confusion. "What is the meaning of this? No being has ever approached Silthara without protective barriers." Chief Engineer Grixtal was frantically checking his control panels. "Commander, I do not understand what is happening. The containment field is still active, but Silthara's bioelectric output has decreased by 60%. She should not be able to do that." Dr. Heywan was taking readings with her scanner, and the results made her gasp. "Captain, you need to see this. The brainwave patterns between Sora and Silthara are starting to match. They are somehow synchronizing." Healer Yulandra of the Lumina Collective pushed through the crowd. She was a tall, graceful being with skin that glowed like moonlight and large silver eyes filled with compassion. Her people were known throughout the galaxy for their ability to sense emotions and mental states. "Please, let me examine both of them," Yulandra said in her musical voice. "I sense no danger here, only a connection that is unprecedented in galactic history." Sora looked back at Silthara, who was still pressed against the glass. The dragon's red eyes were brighter now, more alert than anyone had ever seen them. "She wants to tell me something, but she cannot speak our words very well." "Child," Commander Veltar said harshly, "that creature is the most dangerous weapon in the known galaxy. She has destroyed entire planets." Sora tilted her head and looked at the Kethmori warrior with the honest confusion of a child. "But weapons do not cry, and she has tears in her eyes." Everyone in the room turned to look at Silthara more carefully. The dragon's massive head was still pressed against the viewing window, and indeed there seemed to be moisture gathering in the corners of her ancient red eyes. Dr. Moonsick arrived with his medical equipment and began scanning Sora from a safe distance. "Her vital signs are completely normal. Heart rate steady, no signs of stress or fear. If anything, she seems more relaxed than usual." Ambassador Wei Jin stepped forward carefully. "Commander Veltar, may I ask how Silthara is normally housed when not being displayed?" The Kethmori commander's expression darkened. "That information is classified, but I will say that she has her own chamber and is provided with everything she needs." "Does she have contact with other beings?" Healer Yulandra asked gently. "Contact is not necessary. She is a weapon, not a pet." Sora had been listening to the adults talk, but now she turned back to Silthara. The dragon was making soft sounds, almost like singing. Sora pressed both her small hands against the glass and began humming along with the same melody. The effect was immediate and startling. Silthara's entire body seemed to relax. The tension that had been visible in her muscles faded away, and she lowered herself to the ground so that her eyes were level with Sora's through the window. "Incredible," whispered Dr. Haywan. "Her stress hormones are dropping to levels we have never recorded. It is as if she is experiencing peace for the first time." Engineer Boram was studying the containment systems with growing amazement. "The energy field is still active, but Silthara is not pushing against it anymore. She could probably break free if she wanted to, but she is choosing to stay calm." Captain Namho approached his daughter slowly. "Sora, what is she telling you?" Sora listened carefully to the soft sounds Silthara was making. "She is singing about flying through stars when she was young, before the chains and the small room and the loneliness. She remembers when other dragons sang with her." "Other dragons," Commander Veltar said sharply. "There are no other dragons. Silthara is the last of her kind." "That is why she is so sad," Sora said simply. "She has no family." The room fell silent except for the soft humming that continued between the little girl and the great dragon. Everyone watched as something extraordinary continued to unfold before their eyes. Silthara began, making different sounds, more complex patterns that rose and fell like music. Sora closed her eyes and listened, then began to hum along with parts of the melody. Sometimes she would stop and speak to Silthara in Korean, and the dragon would respond with gentler tones. "They are learning to communicate with each other," Healer Yulandra said in wonder. "The child is teaching the dragon human melodies, and the dragon is sharing the songs of her people." Linguist Jun Seok, who had just arrived from the communications center, was recording everything on his devices. "This is the birth of a new form of interspecies language. We are witnessing history." Commander Veltar watched his empire's ultimate weapon singing lullabies with a human child, and for the first time in his long military career, he began to question everything he thought he knew about strength and power. The greatest destroyer in galactic history had been transformed by the simple gift of friendship from someone who saw past her fearsome appearance to the lonely soul beneath. The crowd in the viewing area had grown larger as word spread throughout the station. Representatives from dozens of species pressed against the walls and windows, all wanting to witness the impossible scene unfolding before them. Some whispered prayers in their native languages, while others took recordings that would be studied for generations to come. Captain Namho stood behind his daughter, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. He could feel how relaxed and happy she was, despite being face-to-face with the most feared creature in known space. His military training told him to pull her away to safety, but his father's instincts told him that Sora was exactly where she needed to be. "Captain," Dr. Moonsix said quietly, "I have been monitoring Sora's brain activity. The patterns suggest she is experiencing the same kind of neural activity that occurs during deep meditation or prayer. She is completely at peace." Commander Veltar paced back and forth like a caged animal. His warriors stood ready with their weapons, but their target was no longer acting like the destroyer they knew. Silthara remained pressed against the viewing window, making soft musical sounds as she communicated with the small human child. "This is not possible," Veltar muttered. "She has been a weapon of war for over 2 centuries. She does not sing. She does not show emotion. She destroys what we point her at." Healer Yulandra moved closer to the commander, her silver eyes filled with compassion. Perhaps the capacity for peace was always there. Perhaps she simply needed someone to see it. Chief Engineer Grixtal was studying his control panels with growing concern. "Commander, the containment field is stable, but I am detecting some unusual energy readings. Silthara is somehow reducing her own bioelectric field. She is making herself less dangerous." Ambassador Wei Jin approached her brother carefully. "Namho, the entire galactic community is watching this. Whatever happens next will affect how they see humanity for generations." Namho nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. He looked down at Sora, who was still humming softly with Silthara. "Little star, is she trying to tell you something important?" Sora listened carefully to the dragon's gentle sounds, then nodded. "She wants to touch my hand. She has never touched another living being without hurting them. She wants to know what it feels like." The request sent a wave of fear through the assembled crowd. Security Officer Thalchris immediately stepped forward, with his forearms spread wide. "Absolutely not. The containment barrier cannot be lowered. It is too dangerous." "The child would be killed instantly," added Dr. Velhassani, a crystalline being whose people were known for their scientific knowledge. "Silthara's natural bioelectric field would stop a human heart." But Dr. Haiwan was studying her readings more carefully. "Wait. Look at these numbers. Silthara's energy output is now at the same level as a normal space whale. She has somehow suppressed her most dangerous abilities." Sora turned around to face her father. Her young face was serious and determined in a way that reminded him of her mother. "Daddy, she will not hurt me. She promised." "How do you know she promised?" Namho asked gently. "Because lonely people understand each other. And she has been lonely for so very long." The room fell silent as everyone considered the impossible request. Commander Veltar was the first to speak. "It is out of the question. I will not risk the life of a child for some experiment." But then Silthara did something that shocked everyone. She moved back from the viewing window and lowered her massive head to the ground in what could only be described as a bow. Her red eyes never left Sora's face, and her expression seemed to plead for understanding. "She is asking permission," Healer Yulandra said in amazement. "A creature that has taken whatever she wanted for 200 years is asking permission to touch a child's hand." Engineer Boram was running calculations on her portable computer. "If we lower the barrier just enough to create a small opening, and if Silthara maintains her current energy levels, it might be safe." "Might be is not good enough," Dr. Moonsick said firmly. "I cannot allow it as the mission's medical officer." Captain Namho looked at his daughter, then at the great dragon who was still bowing her head in respect. He thought about all the military briefings he had attended about showing strength to alien species. He thought about the trade negotiations and the careful diplomacy required to earn respect in the galaxy. Then he thought about his daughter's words about lonely people understanding each other. "Lower the barrier," he said quietly. The room erupted in protests and arguments. Commander Veltar stepped forward with his weapon drawn. "I cannot allow this madness," but Namho held up his hand. "Commander, you say Silthara is your ultimate weapon. But what if she could be something more valuable than a destroyer? What if she could be a bridge between our peoples?" "The risk is too great," Veltar insisted. "The risk of continuing as we have been is greater," Namho replied. "How many more wars will be fought? How many more worlds will fear the Kethmori Empire because of what Silthara has been forced to do?" Sora walked up to Commander Veltar and looked up at his towering form. "She does not want to be scary anymore. She wants to be free." The Kethmori warrior looked down at the small human child, who showed no fear of him or his ultimate weapon. In her eyes, he saw something he had forgotten existed. Hope. After a long moment, he nodded to his chief engineer. "Create the smallest possible opening. If there is any sign of danger, close it immediately." Chief Engineer Grixtal's hands shook as he made the adjustments to the containment field. A small section of the barrier, just large enough for a child's arm, flickered and disappeared. Sora approached the opening slowly. Silthara remained perfectly still, her massive head lowered and her eyes closed as if she were praying. The dragon's breathing was slow and controlled, and everyone could see the effort she was making to remain calm. Sora reached through the opening and gently placed her small hand on Silthara's nose. The dragon's scales were warm and smooth, like polished stone that had been sitting in sunlight. "You are beautiful," Sora whispered in Korean. Then she did something that made every being in the room gasp in wonder and terror. She leaned forward and kissed Silthara's nose. The moment their skin touched, something magical happened. Silthara's ancient red eyes opened, and for the first time in 2 centuries, they filled with tears of joy instead of rage. A sound came. From deep in her throat, not a roar of destruction, but a purr of contentment. The most feared creature in the galaxy wept because someone had shown her kindness. The days following Sora's kiss changed everything on Vashatar Station. What had begun as a simple trade summit had become the most important scientific and cultural event in galactic history. Researchers, diplomats, and curious beings from across the galaxy arrived hourly to witness the transformation of Silthara. Dr. Hei-Wan worked around the clock with teams of xenobiologists from 17 different species. They had set up a temporary laboratory near the viewing area, filled with scanning equipment and monitoring devices. The readings they were getting challenged everything they thought they knew about dragon biology and psychology. "Look at these. Brain scans," Dr. Hei-Wan said to her colleague, Dr. Velhassani, from the Crystal Collective. "Silthara's neural activity has increased by 400% since her interaction with Sora. Sections of her brain that showed no activity for decades are now fully functional." The crystalline scientist's form shimmered as she processed the data. "On my world, we have legends of ancient beings who could fall into a sleep-like state when separated from their social groups. Perhaps Silthara was not truly living, but merely existing." Commander Veltar sat in his temporary office, reviewing reports that made no sense to his military mind. His ultimate weapon was refusing to eat the nutritional paste she had consumed for over 50 years. Instead, she was making sounds that his translators said meant she was asking for fresh fruit and flowers. Battle Sage Morthak, an elderly Kethmori scholar, had arrived from the homeworld to study the situation. His ancient eyes were filled with wonder as he read the reports. "Commander, I have studied the old texts about dragons. Before we captured Silthara, her people were not destroyers. They were gardeners." "Gardeners?" Veltar asked in disbelief. "They shaped worlds, grew forests, created beauty across the galaxy. We turned her into a weapon, but that was never what she was meant to be." In the main viewing area, Sora visited Silthara every day. The small opening in the containment barrier had been expanded to allow more interaction, and the dragon's chamber had been modified to include plants, running water, and natural lighting. Maintenance worker Da-Un had volunteered to help improve Silthara's living space. She was a quiet woman who was good with tools and had a gentle way with all living things. When she entered the chamber with her equipment, everyone expected Silthara to react with suspicion or fear. Instead, the great dragon watched Da-Un work with curious eyes. When the maintenance worker struggled to reach a high place to install a new light, Silthara carefully lifted her with her nose, holding Da-Un steady while she completed her work. "She is incredibly gentle," Da-Un reported afterward. "Her movements are precise and careful. She is afraid of hurting someone by accident." Chef In-Su from the station's kitchen had taken on the challenge of preparing proper meals for a dragon who had been eating processed food for decades. He researched the dietary needs of large reptilian species and began creating meals with fresh vegetables, fruits, and proteins that would satisfy both nutrition and taste. The first time In-Su brought Silthara a meal of fresh fish, exotic fruits, and flowering plants, the dragon smelled each item carefully before eating. When she tasted the sweet berries from Altair 7, her eyes closed with pleasure, and she made the purring sound that had become her new signature. Linguist Jun Seok was making remarkable progress in understanding dragon communication. With Sora's help as a translator, he had begun to decode the complex songs that Silthara sang. "Each song tells a story," he explained to the assembled researchers. This one is about flying through nebulae when she was young. This other one is about the garden worlds her people created. What about this song? Dr. Haywan asked, playing a recording of Silthara's longest and most complex melody. Junseok listened carefully, then asked Sora to help with the translation. The little girl closed her eyes and hummed along with the recording, then opened them with tears on her cheeks. It is the song of her people. All of them. She is the only one left who remembers how it goes. The weight of that revelation settled over everyone in the room. Silthara was not just the last dragon alive. She was the keeper of an entire civilization's memory, carrying the songs and stories of her extinct people in her heart. Healer Yolandra had been conducting daily sessions with Silthara, using her empathic abilities to understand the dragon's emotional state. The trauma runs very deep, she explained to Captain Namho. 2 centuries of isolation and forced violence have left scars that will take time to heal. But the capacity for joy and love is still there, stronger than ever now that it has been awakened. Ambassador Wei Jin was dealing with a flood of requests from governments across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to study Silthara, to understand how humans had accomplished what no other species had managed to do. They do not understand that we did not conquer her, Wei Jin explained to her brother. Sora simply recognized her as a person instead of a thing. The most dramatic change came when Sora asked Silthara if she wanted to see the stars. The dragon's chamber had artificial lighting, but no windows to the outside. When Chief Engineer Grixtal modified one wall to include a transparent section facing space, Silthara spent hours pressed against it, looking out at the galaxy she had once flown through freely. She wants to fly again, Sora translated as Silthara sang a particularly melancholy song. But she is afraid. Afraid of what? Captain Namho asked. Afraid that if she leaves, no one will remember that she is not a monster anymore. Dr. Moonsik had been monitoring Sora's health throughout her interactions with Silthara. Remarkably, spending time with the dragon seems to be making Sora healthier and happier. Her stress levels are the lowest I have ever recorded, and her cognitive development is accelerating. What does that mean? Namho asked. It means your daughter is learning things that no human has ever learned before. She is developing new ways of thinking and communicating that could benefit our entire species. As word spread throughout the galaxy about the transformation of Silthara, the story took on a life of its own. Children on dozens of worlds drew pictures of the little human girl and the white dragon. Songs were written about their friendship. Philosophers debated what it meant for the future of interspecies relations. But on Vashatar Station, in the quiet moments between the chaos of scientific study and diplomatic meetings, a small girl and an ancient dragon continued to share songs and stories, proving that the strongest force in the universe was not fear or violence, but the simple power of seeing someone for who they really were. 6 months had passed since Sora's kiss changed the galaxy forever. Vashatar Station had been transformed from a simple trading post into the most important diplomatic center in known space. Ships arrived daily carrying delegates, scientists, and families who wanted to witness the miracle of friendship between species. Silthara no longer lived in a containment chamber. Her new home was a vast biodome that recreated the garden worlds her people had once tended. Streams of clear water flowed between flowering trees, and soft grass covered rolling hills under an artificial sky that showed the real stars beyond. The chains that had bound her for centuries were gone, replaced by nothing more than her own choice to stay. Captain Namho stood in the central observation deck, watching his daughter play with a group of alien children while Silthara rested. Nearby, Sora was now 8 years old and spoke fluent dragon song, a language that linguists were still trying to fully understand. She had become the official translator between Silthara and the galactic community. Admiral Kyuho had arrived from Earth the week before to see what his diplomatic mission had accomplished. He was a stern man with gray hair and sharp eyes, but even he seemed amazed by what he found on the station. "Captain, when I sent you here, I hoped you might negotiate some favorable trade agreements," Admiral Kyuho said, reviewing the reports on his datapad. "I never expected you to revolutionize interspecies relations." "It was not me, sir. It was Sora." She saw what the rest of us missed. Through the observation window, they could see Silthara gently lifting a young Zephyrian child with her nose, letting the little bird-like being pet her scales while his parents watched in amazement. 6 months ago, the Zephyrians would have fled in terror at the sight of the White Death. Now their children played with her like she was a gentle giant from their fairy tales. Commander Veltar approached the 2 human officers. The Kethmori warrior looked different than he had 6 months ago. His armor was less intimidating, and his red eyes had lost some of their harsh glow. "Captain Namho, I have received word from Empress Kathmira. She wishes to formally thank your people for what you have given us." "What have we given you, Commander?" Namho asked. "You have given us back our honor. For 2 centuries, the galaxy has feared and hated the Kethmori because of what we did with Silthara. Now they see that we can be protectors instead of destroyers." The transformation of the Kethmori Empire had been one of the most unexpected results of Silthara's change. When other species saw that the dragon could choose peace, they began to reconsider their relationships with her former handlers. Trade agreements were signed. Ancient enemies began talking instead of fighting. Dr. Heiwan joined the group, carrying her latest research findings. "Gentlemen, you will want to see this. We have been analyzing the bioenergy patterns of everyone who has interacted closely with Silthara. The results are remarkable." She activated a holographic display showing brain scans and energy readings. Extended contact with Silthara is actually improving the mental and physical health of other species. Children who play with her show increased intelligence and emotional stability. Adults report feeling more peaceful and creative. "How is that possible?" Admiral Kyuho asked. "We think dragons were meant to be symbiotic with other intelligent species. Their bioenergy fields promote wellness and growth in those around them. When Silthara was isolated and forced to be a weapon, she could not fulfill this natural function. Now that she is free to be herself, she is healing everyone she meets." Ambassador Wei Jin approached with a group of dignitaries from the Galactic Council. The council was the closest thing to a central government that existed in their part of space, and their presence meant that official recognition was coming. "Council Speaker Andromeda wishes to make an announcement," Wei Jin said formally. The tall, graceful woman who led the council stepped forward. Her people were known for their wisdom and their ability to see long-term consequences of current actions. "Captain Namho, the Galactic Council has voted unanimously to establish the Vashatar Accords, a new treaty for interspecies cooperation based on the principles demonstrated by your daughter and Silthara." "What principles are those?" Namho asked. "That true strength comes from understanding, not domination. That every being deserves to be seen for who they are, not what they have been forced to become. That friendship can accomplish what weapons cannot." Sora came running up to the group of adults, her face bright with excitement. Behind her, Silthara moved with the slow grace of a living mountain, her white scales shimmering in the artificial sunlight. "Daddy, Silthara wants to tell everyone something important," Sora announced. The great dragon positioned herself where all the gathered beings could see her clearly. She began to sing in her deep, musical voice, a song more complex and beautiful than any she had shared before. Sora listened carefully, then began to translate. She says that long ago her people had a dream. They dreamed of a galaxy where all intelligent beings could live together in peace, sharing knowledge and beauty instead of fighting over resources and territory. Silthara's song continued, rising and falling like waves on a distant shore. Sora closed her eyes to listen more carefully, then opened them with tears of joy. The dragons were guardians of this dream. They traveled from world to world, helping different species learn to understand each other. They grew gardens that could feed entire planets and taught others how to live in harmony with their environments. The assembled beings listened in wonder as the story unfolded. Many had heard legends of ancient times when the galaxy was more peaceful, but no one had known that dragons were the reason for that peace. But then the dragons began to disappear. Wars broke out over misunderstandings. Species turned against each other. The dream seemed lost. Sora paused as Silthara's song became sadder. Silthara was captured when she was very young. She was the last one left, and she forgot the dream because she was taught only to destroy. The dragon's song shifted again, becoming brighter and more hopeful. But now she remembers, and she says the dream is not dead. It is growing again, here on this station, with all of us. Silthara looked directly at Sora as she sang the final verses of her song. The little girl smiled and sang along in Korean, her sweet voice blending with the dragon's ancient melody. She says that love is the strongest power in the universe, not the love that wants to possess or control, but the love that sets others free to be who they truly are. Commander Veltar stepped forward and did something that shocked everyone, including his own warriors. He removed his weapon and laid it on the ground, then knelt before Silthara. "Forgive us," he said in his deep voice. "We took your dream and turned it into a nightmare. But if you will allow it, the Kethmori wish to help you rebuild what was lost." Silthara lowered her great head and gently touched the commander's shoulder with her nose. Her touch conveyed forgiveness and acceptance, and Veltar rose with tears in his red eyes. Admiral Q-Ho watched the ceremony with growing understanding. This is why other species are no longer afraid of humanity. They see that we can look at the most dangerous creature in the galaxy and choose to see a friend instead of an enemy. "It is more than that," said healer Yul Andra, who had been quietly observing the emotional currents in the room. "Humans have the gift of seeing potential instead of just reality. You look at what beings could become, not just what they are." Dr. Moonsick approached Captain Namho with a communication device. "Sir, we are receiving messages from across the galaxy. Dozens of species are requesting human ambassadors to help with conflicts that have lasted for centuries. They want to learn how we do what we do." Sora tugged on her father's uniform to get his attention. "Daddy, Silthara wants to know if she can visit other worlds. She wants to plant gardens again and teach people the old songs." Namho looked at Commander Veltar, who nodded slowly. "The Kethmori Empire will provide ships and protection for wherever Silthara wishes to go. It is the least we can do. And humans will provide translators and diplomats," Admiral Q-Ho added. "If other species want to learn from us, we should be willing to teach." As the sun set on Vashatar Station, casting long shadows through the biodome, beings from dozens of worlds sat together sharing food and stories. Children of different species played games that transcended language barriers, while their parents discussed trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Silthara rested in the center of it all, her white scales glowing softly in the evening light. Sora sat curled up against the dragon's side, reading a book of fairy tales from Earth, while Silthara hummed lullabies from her ancient world. "What happens now?" Engineer Boram asked Captain Namho. Namho looked around at the peaceful scene, at his daughter who had changed the galaxy with a simple act of kindness, at the former weapon of mass destruction, who was now a symbol of hope. Now, "We keep the dream alive," he said simply. "We remember that every being we meet has the potential to be a friend instead of an enemy. We choose understanding over fear, and love over hate." Silthara lifted her great head and sang one final song. As the artificial stars came out overhead, Sora translated the words for everyone to hear. Love is the strongest power. It can transform the fiercest warrior into the gentlest guardian. It can turn enemies into family. It can make the impossible become real. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their military might. It was their ability to see the good in others, even when others had forgotten it existed within themselves. And in the heart of a little girl who had kissed a dragon's nose, the ancient dream of peace among the stars began to bloom once again.